Hi everybody, today is Tuesday, February 6th, 2018. My name is Brian McInerney. I'm the hydrologist here at the National Weather Service in Salt Lake City, Utah. This is the long version of the February water supply forecast. So why don't we take a look at the general weather pattern to start things off. This is the overarching reason why we're in such dire straits. This is a rendition of the winds at about 18,000 to 22,000 feet. The yellow dot is Salt Lake City. And what you see is most of the energy in the weather is going north of us. And this has been the case really since November. The red areas indicate the fastest winds. This is the jet stream. Where the jet stream goes, the storm track goes. And unfortunately for us, it's been over the top of us. It's usually been coming down in the Midwest and up the East Coast like we see here. And that's why we're dry. And that's tough. When you look at the precip as a result of this weather pattern, warm colors indicate below average precip. And you look in the green out in the desert, it's green because they don't really get much. But for the most part, everything is below average with a few exceptions. Where it counts in the mountains is where we need to take a look. And what we see are some areas that are 70 to 90% up north, but then you get most of the state at 50 to 70%. And then there's other areas. And granted, this is January. We'll look at the cumulative, but January was a little bit better than what we see for the entire time. Here's what we see from October through January. That purple area is less than 30% precipitation. The farther north you go, the better it gets, but the best we're going to see is up in the upper green, somewhere around 100 to 110%, but the majority of the state is around 50 to 70%, with some areas less than 30%. Where it counts in the mountains, again, 30 to 50% from central Utah down. Maybe some of the Wasatch and the Uintas at 50 to 70, and then parts of the Bear and the upper Weber up in that 70 to 90%. But overall, pretty grim. And there was a lot of rain in November, so it really didn't stay as snow, and that was a tough take. So not only has it been quite dry, it's been quite hot. This is the Salt Lake Airport February temperature anomaly. On the y-axis are the degrees above what is for that certain day. And then the x-axis is time. And what you see are the average. Some days got up to 18 degrees above. Near the end of the month, we were up around 16 degrees above average. But when you average this all together, 9.5 degrees above what you typically want in February. When we look at it graphically for January, the western U.S. has been quite warm. Midwest and East doing much better. Roughly 5 to 7 degrees. Some areas 7 to 10 degrees, but quite hot. And then when you look at February, we have been really quite warm. 10 to 13 degrees. Some areas 13 to 16 degrees. Little area of the UN is about 16 degrees above. And this is the following pattern that we've had. So when you look at the snowpack, as a result of the high pressure ridging moving everything north, this is what we see. And what I've done is averaged all the snow tell stations run by the NRCS in each basin and averaged them together. Snow water equivalent in inches are on the y-axis. Time is on the x. And when you look at the Bear River overall, 75% of median. And that's kind of how we'll look at snow with median. The Weber at 58%. I forgot to tell you, the red line is last year, which is a little tough to look at. The blue line is the 30-year average. The green line is where we are right now. So when you look at the Weber, they're at 58%. And that line just does not seem to want to get to average. 54% for Six Creeks. Again, as we go farther south, things drop off. 49% at Utah Lake Drainage. Duchesne at 57%. Upper Green, that's about the best we're going to get at 103%. Lake Powell at 63%. That also has parts of Colorado. The Sevier at 44%. The Virgin at 32%. And the Virgin has the poorest snowpack of the entire state when you look at percent of average. So when you look at the long-range forecast for mid-February, this is a model run. And it's an ensemble. The dark brown areas indicate the lack of any storms. It's high pressure as those lines kind of come over the top. This may be a little confusing to read, but in essence, this is what we see. When you see about, this goes out to February 10th is where we're at right now. You see a little blue area. That's a storm that goes through, little low, and that's on the weekend. And then we're out to Tuesday the 13th, Wednesday the 14th, still nothing. Thursday the 15th, Friday the 16th, still nothing. That brown area encompasses all of the state, all of the country. And now we're out to the 19th of February, the 20th of February, and there still doesn't seem to be any storminess. Out to the 21st, there's a lack of storms, that except for that one this next weekend, and that's what the meteorologists at the National Weather Service are looking at to see. When you take that model run and you say, well, how much precip does that give us with that one little storm on the weekend? We see maybe a half an inch. California is essentially shut out of any precip through mid-February, and as is Nevada. So when you look at the models, what we're looking at, this is what we see, that grim look all the way out to, third week of, moving up to the third week of February, and that's about as far as we can go. Look out there. So as a result of all these conditions that we've seen, very dry, very hot, lack of storms, here's the water supply forecast. And this is made by the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center. They're in the same room as the National Weather Service Forecast Office. We're all part of NOAA. These are all the hydrologists that make this forecast. So we'll look at Woodruff Narrows Reservoir to start with, and then Stewart Dam. Woodruff Narrows Reservoir at 71% of average. This is the area you want to look at when we kind of roll through the 71% of average, 78% of median, 86,000 acre feet. And then you look at the graphic part. That's where the model run is. That's the different 10%, 30% chance, 50%. What we'll look at this forecast is the 50% chance. You have a 70% chance is the lower dot. 90% chance is the dot on the bottom. You have a 90% chance of making that according to the model run and what the hydrologists think. And we're looking at February's forecast. So January's forecast was the vertical line to start. February's forecast was the next vertical line. And then you see the ESP model that we use. And that is kind of an indicator of where the conditions are trending. Okay, so we'll look at Stewart Dam, 46% of average, 71% of median, 83,000 acre feet. And you can see the line is somewhat close, but lately into February with those very hot, very dry conditions, the model is starting to drop off, saying you're expecting less. Now we move to the Weber, and what we look at is Oakley. That's a headwater area, East Canyon, into East Canyon Reservoir, and then Pine View Reservoir. And what we see is the Weber near Oakley at 64% of average, 66% of median at 76,000 acre feet. And you look at that blue line on the graphical part, it's kind of declining since we had the forecast in January. Down to February, it's a little lower. And you can see the dotted line on the bottom there. There's a lot going on. But that's the min that this area has seen all the way back to 1934. And there's once we get past that bottom part of the forecast, we drop out. There is a chance, but most likely we're hovering between average and what the lowest is seen. No, we're not even close to what the max was in 1907. East Canyon, near East Canyon Reservoir, 51% of average, 53% of median, 13.7 thousand acre feet. And that forecast has dropped a bit, but it seems to be staying tough. And then Pine View Reservoir, 50% of average, 57% median, 56,000 acre feet. And that forecast is dropping off a little bit more. Six Creeks, we'll look at Little Cottonwood, and then we'll look at City Creek. And Little Cottonwood is expected to produce 63% of average, 69% of median, 24,000 acre feet. Forecast is declining just a bit, and there's a possibility we could reach the min in 1961 if it all just stays dry. City Creek, 53% of average, 69% median, 4.1 thousand acre feet, and that's about the same from January. That really hasn't moved a whole lot. And then Utah Lake, what we'll look at is near Woodland up in the headwater areas. And then we'll look at the Spanish Fork River near Castilla. Provo near Woodland, 75% average, 74% median. And that forecast is declining. Spanish Fork near Castilla, 35% average, 51% median, 24,000 acre feet. And it's staying low, but staying relatively stable. Now moving over to the Duchesne, we'll look at three areas. Strawberry Reservoir, Duchesne near Tabiona, and at Knight's Diversion. And at Strawberry, 32% of average, 48% median, 23,000 acre feet. And that's basically staying somewhat put. 67% of average for Tabiona. That's kind of a headwater for the Duchesne River. 77% median, and that's staying about the same. And then at Knight's Diversion, 66% average, 75% median, and that's staying about the same, 129,000 acre feet. So pretty grim numbers. Now we move to the price. We'll look at Schofield to start with, Schofield Reservoir, and then Joe's Valley. And what we see for Schofield is at 34% of average, 40% median, 14,000 acre feet, and the model is declining. And you have to take into account all the way out to the third week of February, we still don't see much. So if you're operating reservoirs, it's something to think of. It doesn't look very good about to the third week of February. Joe's Valley, 43% of average, 52% median, 24,000 acre feet. And then the upper Green, we'll look at Green River, Wyoming, up there. And we'll start with Flaming Gorge inflow. And this is what we see. Flaming Gorge, 91% of average, 107% median, 8.9 million acre feet. And the forecast is pretty stable. And this place, this area, Flaming Gorge, did wonderful last year. They had to dump massive amounts just to make space. Green River, 103%, 119, and this is Wyoming, not Utah. And that's 750,000 acre feet. When we look at Lake Powell, Cisco at the border of Colorado and Utah, and the actual Lake Powell inflow, 54% of average for Cisco, 61% median at 2.4 million acre feet at Cisco. Lake Powell, 47%, 53% median, 3.4 million acre feet. A little tough to see. Forecast is staying quite stable, still low. And then we'll start at the headwaters at Hatch, and then we'll move to the Paiute Reservoir. Hatch is the headwater. Everything flows south to north here. At 44% average, 58% median, 21,000 acre feet. And that forecast has been pretty stable. 37% average, 51% median for the Paiute Reservoir near Marysvale on the Sevier River. And it's getting close to the all-time low in 1957. And when you think of that high pressure is going to last through the third week of February, we could hit the lowest on this area depending on how we go. Now we'll move over to the Virgin. The headwater at the Virgin, near Virgin, and then Lake Littlefield at the outlet. What we see are 48% average, 68% median, 28,000 acre feet at Virgin. And Littlefield at 26% average, 45% median at 17.2 thousand acre feet. Hovering right around the lowest at 1934 at Littlefield. We'll see how that shakes out. So when you look at drought, as far as January 31st, and this is from the U.S. Drought Monitor, it takes a look at the whole country. Utah has a sizable area in D2 severe drought. There's parts, the farther north you go, it gets a little better, in D1, and then abnormally dry up in the Bear. And that's a direct result of where this high has been located and how much storminess. And then the question is, how does this compare to last year? So what I did was made this little graphic. So this is this year. That's last year. This year, last year, this year, last year, this year, and last year. You can see it's such an improvement from last year to this year. Maybe California's doing a little better than it was, but it was in the worst drought category of D4, had a bunch there. We're doing a lot worse than we were last year. However, the reservoirs are quite good. That's the shining moment of this whole thing we're looking at. We'll stick with that because the rest is pretty depressing. So if you need anything, there's my contact info. There's my phone number, my email. If I can do anything for you, if you'd like to see any of this briefing shifted around, anything with different data, any way to look at the data, let me know. I'd be glad to help you out. Looks pretty grim to the third week of February. We've been at this really since November. I don't see anything that looks very promising at this point, but hopefully we'll shake out of this. So there you go. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this, and we'll talk to you again. Thanks.